was a very large plane. It was going fast. It went past the Ritz-Carlton hotel that's being built in Battery Park. It flew right past it, almost hit it, and then went in.
Holy shit. Oh my God! Oh my God!
Islam is one of the world's great religions.
Islam brings hope and comfort.
As a student of history, I also know civilization's debt to Islam.
Islam traces its origins back to God's call on Abraham.
Islam has demonstrated through words and deeds the possibilities of religious tolerance and racial equality.
Islam affirms God's justice and insists on man's moral responsibility.
America and Islam are not exclusive and need not be in competition. Instead, they overlap and share common principles.
The Muslim faith is based upon peace and love and compassion.
There is a mosque in every state in our union.
Islam is peace.
World leaders marched arm in arm with the massive crowd in Paris on Sunday in memory of the 17 people who were killed in terrorist attacks in this past week. French President François Hollande led the proceedings, while hundreds of thousands of people from across France and elsewhere descended on Paris for the rally.
People of Israel send their condolences to the people of France over the brutal act of savagery in the heart of Paris today. The attacks of radical Islam know no boundaries. These are international attacks, and the response has to be international. The terrorists want to destroy our freedoms and our civilization, and therefore all the free countries and all the civilized societies have to band together to fight this scourge. And if we stand together, and if we're not divided, then we can defeat this tyranny that seeks to extinguish all our freedoms. I wish once again to express the sympathy that every citizen of Israel feels for the people of France and for the bereaved families. We are experiencing these attacks time and again. We know the pain, but we also know the resolution with which free societies can defeat terror, however dreadful, however threatening. We remember that day 13 years ago, and we mourn with you on this day for the thousands who lost their lives in that horrific attack. All of Israel mourned on September 11th. In Gaza, they were dancing on the roofs. They were handing out candy. That's the moral divide. We mourn, they celebrate the death of thousands of innocents. And then when the U.S. took out bin Laden, I, speaking for virtually the entire country, congratulated President Obama. In Gaza, Hamas condemned the U.S. and called bin Laden a holy warrior of Islam. That's the moral divide. We celebrate, they mourn the death of an arch-terrorist. Now that moral divide has never been clearer than it is today, because Hamas, like Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, Al-Nusra, or its new growth, ISIS, or Boko Haram, Al-Shabab, Hezbollah, supported by Iran, all are branches of the same poisonous tree. All present a clear and present danger to the peace and security of the world, and to our common civilization. I believe that the battle against these groups is indivisible, and it's important not to let any of these groups succeed anywhere. Because if they gain ground somewhere, they gain ground everywhere. And their setbacks are also felt everywhere. If they gain ground, if they were to succeed, they would return humanity to a primitive early medievalism. I say early medievalism because my late father, was a great historian of the Middle Ages, and I'd be giving them too much compliment. Early medievalism, primitive early medievalism, where women are treated as chattel, as property, and gays are stoned and minorities persecuted if they're left alive at all. And these groups must be fought. They must be rolled back, and they must ultimately be defeated. That's why Israel fully supports President Obama's call for united actions against ISIS. All civilized countries should stand together in the fight against radical terrorism that sweeps across the Middle East, sweeps across the world. And we are playing our part in this continued effort. Some of the things are known, some things are less known. We have always viewed it as our common battle for our common future. Now, the fight against Islamist terrorism has created new alliances in the Middle East because many Sunni Arab states recognize that the threat of Iran's aggression and its radical Shiite proxies pose a fundamental danger to them, as does fundamentalist Sunni terrorism. And as a result of this, these twin threats of radical Shiism using terrorist tactics, radical Sunnism using terrorist tactics, as a result of this, they're reevaluating their relationship with Israel. And they understand that Israel is not their enemy, but their ally in the fight against this common enemy. And I believe this presents an opportunity for cooperation and perhaps an opportunity for peace. I think it's crucial not to let the fight against Sunni extremism make us forget the danger of Shiite extremism. They're two sides of the same coin. We don't have to strengthen one to weaken the other. My policy is weaken both. And most importantly, don't allow any of them to get weapons of mass destruction. And that's why the arrangement that was achieved in Syria to disband and take out the chemical weapons and chemical materials was so important. And I think President Obama had a very important achievement there. We understand what it would mean that any of these sides would have weapons of mass destruction, because all you have to imagine is what would have happened if on 9/11 Al-Qaeda had nuclear weapons. You know they would have used them against New York and against Washington. It's unassailable. These groups have absolutely no moral or other impediment to their mad desires. Once they have massive power, they will unleash all their violence, all their ideological zeal, all their hatreds with weapons of mass death. And all you have to imagine is what would have happened if Al-Qaeda today had access to chemical weapons in Syria. Well, then project that. What would happen if the terrorist regime in Iran will have weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons? Within weeks, a few months, you have nuclear weapons. That's a bad deal. And if Iran has nuclear weapons, you will see a tremendous pivot in the world. No, not in the Middle East, in the world. You will see things you never imagined could be possible. Horrors that you couldn't even contemplate come to fruition. The ultimate terror. A terrorist regime with the weapons of the greatest terror of them all. We must not let that happen. The so-called Arab Spring, which has not materialized as some people had thought. I think it's now clear that the forces of democracy have not come to the fore. And if anything, what we've seen is old regimes collapse and Islamist forces come to the surface, old hatreds, Shiite against Shiite, but primarily Shiite against Sunni, Sunni against Sunni, all come bursting from subterranean layers of history and frustration. And they all have one common goal. The goal is we establish a new Islamist dominion, first in the Middle East and in their warped thinking throughout the world. They all agree on that. They're not limited in their scope to a territory. They're not limited to borders. They're basically, they may be pivoted in a state. They may be anchored in a particular place. But their goal is to take the entire world, to cleanse it of infidels, first their own people, Muslims, and then everyone else. Madness. They all agree that they have to establish the caliphate. They all disagree who should be the caliph. That's the nature of their disagreements. And they all use essentially the same tactic. And that's unbridled violence, fear, terror. And the terror is, first of all, imposed on their own peoples. That's the number one target, before anyone else. If your people want to rise up against you, as they did in Iran 5 years ago, you kill them. You send out your troopers to the streets, besiege, and just shoot them on the sidewalks. You steal millions of votes, people protest, you shoot them. But it's not enough to shoot them one time. You constantly shoot them, or to be more precise in Iran, you hang them. Anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people are annually executed in Iran. I'm not talking about criminals. I'm not talking about people who've broken the law. People who have the temerity to have a different view, question the regime. And they're hung in public squares. And sometimes they're hung from cranes. They don't have enough scaffolds. And you see the same thing. Same thing. Doesn't receive the same prominence from ISIS, same technique. You take over a population, the first thing is, yes, you lop heads off and this tragic barbarism that we've witnessed, but you also take people to the burial pits and you shoot them by the hundreds and thousands.